Hello, what a great day to begin the book of Exodus. Thanks for joining me with Teaching Through the Bible. Today we are beginning the book of Exodus. We have completed the book of Genesis previously, and we're finally on to the book of Exodus. We're on to the book that is about God's people leaving enslavement in the land of Egypt to go to the promised land. This was promised back in Genesis, the book of beginnings. It's where the word Genesis comes from, in fact, beginnings. But now we're here in Exodus. And as we begin this, we're going to look pretty much just at chapter 1 today for the most part. And as we look there and a little bit into chapter 2, we're going to notice a number of things. You may notice that several of these things will point us to Jesus. You may be expecting this by now. I hope you are, because that should be the expectation. I've said this before, but we don't always notice where different parts of the Bible point to Jesus, but that's not because they don't point there. It's because we're not perfect. We don't always get it. We don't always understand. And so sometimes we may read parts of the Bible and say, I don't know what I'm looking at here. But again, that's not an issue with the Bible. That's an issue with us and just not being perfect beings and not knowing everything, not understanding everything correctly. Hopefully, though, as we go through this book, we can all understand Exodus a little bit better. So we start in chapter 1 with it just mentioning that all the people came from Canaan, all of Jacob's family, down into Egypt. So they have traveled there because of a famine. We saw that at the end of Genesis. So that's where chapter 1 begins. Talks about the names of all of them. It may be a good question to wonder, okay, what's the reason for this particular ordering of the sons of Jacob? Reuben, Shimei, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. So obviously Joseph was already there, so he's not listed as one of the ones coming down from Canaan. But it's not chronological. It's not by age, because Benjamin is not the last one listed. So I'm not really sure what motivation they may have for listing it this way, but I wonder if there's something to that. That's just an observation. Sometimes we learn things by just observing something and asking a question, and then later on perhaps we figure out why something's happening and there's a significance to it. So that's just a question I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts on that. Just like when you have questions, if you have an answer, just comment below. So let's continue on with chapter 1. It's that 70 people that came down from Canaan to Egypt, and Joseph died. In verse 6, then Joseph died and all his brothers and all that generation. So that's pretty much end of Genesis right there, right? But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so the land was filled with them. Well, hopefully, that rings a bell. If you've been through the Genesis portion of the class, this should ring some bells. Hey, wait a second. I have definitely heard that phrase before, right? This is what God commanded Adam and Eve. This is the first thing, to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, right? And then when there was a flood, when they came out of the ark, what did God say? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. When he made a covenant with Abram, he said, I'm going to make you fruitful and multiply. Here we are once again seeing the same thing. So Abraham he's supposed to be fulfilling this command, right? This was now turned into a promise that you will be doing this. You will be fruitful, you will multiply, you will bless all the families of the earth. And here we've got Israel doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's awesome. Great start there. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And what this probably means is you have these different dynasties in Egypt. So you'll have a number of kings, maybe have 4, 5, 6 kings, whatever, in a row. And then their dynasty ends and a new dynasty comes in. And that could be a small change, that could be a very huge change. It could be like a whole different group of people coming in and taking over Egypt. There's a lot of history there with Egypt. And I'm not going to get into all of that stuff, but there's definitely stuff you can read if you want to. It's pretty interesting, but probably what's going on is there was this switch in dynasties. Maybe that's not what happened. It doesn't say that specifically, but that would be certainly one way to read this. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. So they enslaved the Israelites. Now, this also should sound familiar because God said this was going to happen, that they were going to be enslaved for 400 years before God came and brought them to the land of Canaan, to the promised land. So the slavery has begun. Now, who is this Pharaoh? A lot of people wonder about that. So just like the guy in Genesis, it just says Pharaoh, which is just the title for the king of Egypt. So it does not give his name. Now, there's a lot of different suggestions over who it could be, but really the two that are most commonly looked at as the possibilities that's going to be throughout Exodus is going to be either Thutmose III or Ramses II. Now, that could be true. It could be either one of those. Actually, John Currid, he's an archaeologist that he's written some stuff on this, and he's got some good stuff. He comes out kind of on the other side than I do. I think it's more likely Thutmose III. He thinks maybe it's Ramses II, but I think a lot of his stuff, it's good stuff to kind of see what are the arguments for both sides. At a very basic level, is probably oversimplifying, but the Bible seems to lean towards a time period that would fit with Thutmose III. It could be that we're not reading it quite right, that there's something we're missing in there. It's definitely not a definitive thing, but it seems like that he would fit that time. Ramses II was a while later, over 100 years after Thutmose III. But it seems like maybe archaeology points a little bit more towards him. Certainly not definitive, and even Currid, who does think it's probably Ramses II, will say, like, don't take this to the bank. Don't bet on it. It could be either one. And it's kind of fuzzy because there's just some details we're lacking. But Ramses II, he could be the Pharaoh during the Exodus. If you've seen Prince of Egypt, that one definitely takes that view on it as Ramses II. Again, this is a possibility. It also could be that the archaeology, maybe we're misunderstanding something there. Either way, those are just two of the names that are possibilities as far as who is the Pharaoh. And it gets even a little more complicated because there's a Pharaoh here, but then later on we're going to see that Pharaoh dies and a new Pharaoh comes up. And that's where you see, like in the movie Prince of Egypt, which is not totally accurate, just, it's an enjoyable movie, it has some good stuff in it, has great music in it, but not totally accurate. It may even be a good exercise to read through this and then watch that and try to see where the differences are, to kind of key in on those and recognize what we see in the Bible versus what we see in entertainment media. But you had the Pharaoh, and then Moses runs off, and when he comes back, the Pharaoh's son is the king. So also it's like, okay, so we have these two different kings, and which one, who's who, and all this kind of stuff. But that's not the most important thing. So that's part of why I'm not going to dig more into, well, here's the evidence for this guy, here's the evidence for that guy, and all this stuff. That's not the main thing. And if it was really important, it could have been written in here. It wasn't. So anyways, you've got these guys the Egyptians are enslaving the Israelites at this point. And this obviously is a problem. This begins something where God is orchestrating their salvation. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel, and hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.